Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling Occidental Petroleum.
Yeah, Occidental Petroleum.
We're going way beyond just gas stations and looking at their whole business.
Their business.
We've got their 10K reports from 2023 and 2024, and even the first 2 quarters of 10Qs for 2024.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
So we're going to figure out what they actually do, how they make their money, and what makes them different.
Occidental, they're often just seen as like an oil company.
Right, but is that all there is to them?
There's more to it, definitely. It's not that simple.
Okay, so when you hear Occidental Petroleum, what comes to mind first?
Honestly, it's their diverse portfolio. They've got oil and gas for sure, but that's not all. They have other stuff going on, which makes them pretty resilient in this crazy energy market.
So more than just pumping oil in the desert.
Eh.
Tell me more.
First, you have their oil and gas segment.
The classic.
Exactly. That's their main thing. They're operating in the Permian Basin, the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, and internationally, too, in places like Qatar.
Qatar. So they're not just a U.S. company.
Right. They want resources from all over.
Makes sense. But you mentioned they have other revenue streams, too.
Yeah. This is the interesting part.
Lay it on me.
They have a whole chemicals segment. It's through OxyChem.
OxyChem.
They're a big deal in basic chemicals, like chlorine, PVC pipes.
Wow, so the stuff we use every day.
Yeah, everyday things.
So they're not just taking stuff out of the ground. They're actually making things, too.
Exactly. And that helps them when oil and gas prices go up and down.
It's smart.
Yeah.
So what else?
They have this midstream and marketing segment. It's basically how they get their products out there to the market.
So pipelines, all that.
Yeah, pipelines, processing, transporting. They even sell power.
Wow, a real energy empire. But running an empire can't be cheap. What are their biggest costs?
Well, just think about it. All their operations, from exploring for oil and gas to running chemical plants, managing pipelines.
Yeah, it's huge. So where does all their money go?
One of the biggest things is exploration and production costs.
Like finding the oil and getting it out.
Exactly. Everything from mapping the underground to drilling, getting the oil out. It all adds up. And, it can be risky.
Risky how?
Well, you're putting a lot of money into exploration, but what if you don't find enough oil and gas to make it worthwhile?
Ah, I see.
Like in their 2023 report, they talked about price revisions in the Permian Basin. They found less valuable stuff than they thought.
So it's a gamble.
Okay.
So let's say they find the oil and get it out. What's next?
Then you've got operating costs, the daily expenses of keeping everything going.
Makes sense.
Like lease operating costs, transportation, labor, maintaining all those huge facilities. And of course, there are environmental regulations.
Yeah, those can't be cheap.
Definitely not. They add a whole other layer of complexity and cost.
The energy industry is under a lot of pressure these days. What kind of regulations are we talking about?
Well, in their reports, they talked about some interesting stuff. Like in Texas and New Mexico, there are these regulations about seismic activity.
Earthquakes.
Yeah, people worry that drilling can trigger earthquakes. So they have to be really careful where they drill.
So they can't just drill anywhere.
Nope, it's not that simple. There's another big cost to environmental liabilities.
What's that?
Basically, cleaning up messes from the past, things that weren't so environmentally friendly back then.
Oh, right.
For example, their 2023 report mentioned cleanup costs at the Lower Passaic River site.
So they're still dealing with old problems.
They are. It shows how much environmental responsibility matters in their business now.
Definitely. It makes you think about what goes into that gallon of gas you buy. But let's switch gears a bit. Why would a company choose to work with Occidental? What makes them stand out?
Well, for one, they're big, and they've been around for a long time, decades of experience. That means they're reliable, they can deliver.
So they're a safe bet.
Exactly. And they have a massive amount of oil and gas reserves. It means they can offer a steady supply, which is super important in today's market.
It's like having a guarantee, right?
Yeah.
A guarantee. But there's something else, something really interesting they're doing. They're pushing hard on sustainability.
Sustainability, okay.
They're investing a lot in carbon capture and storage. They want to be the leader in low-carbon solutions.
So they're not just an oil company. They're trying to be part of a cleaner future.
Exactly. They're looking ahead.
That's bold. What are some of their goals?
Well, in their 2023 report, they said they want to reach net zero operational emissions by 2040. And get this, they're teaming up with BlackRock to build a direct air capture facility.
Whoa, capturing carbon right out of the air?
Yeah, it's like science fiction, but it's happening.
It shows they're serious about this.
They are. They know the world is changing.
So they're reliable, they have a lot of oil and gas, and they're going green. Anything else?
Well, in this industry, everyone's trying to be on top. Occidental has some specific strategies.
I'm all ears.
They're super focused on high margin inventory. They want projects with big returns. If something isn't profitable, they'll get rid of it.
No messing around. Nope. Like in 2020, they sold some stuff in Colombia and the Permian Basin.
So they're not afraid to make tough choices.
Not at all. They're also all about using the latest tech.
Okay.
They're using enhanced oil recovery to get more oil from existing wells. They even have their own system called OXY jetting.
Fancy. And we can't forget about their carbon capture stuff.
Right. It's not just about being green. They see it as a big business opportunity. They were pioneers in this.
Pioneers.
They had some of the first EPA-approved plans for storing CO2. It's like they're building these massive underground vaults for carbon.
Amazing. So we've got smart investments, cutting-edge tech, and a focus on carbon capture.
Yeah.
But what about the actual work? What do they need to do well to make all this happen?
It all starts with finding new resources.
Exploration.
Right. And they have to be smart about it. Exploration's risky, remember?
High stakes.
Yeah.
So what else matters?
Drilling and production need to be super efficient.
Get the most out with the least effort.
Exactly. That's where all that cool tech comes in. And they can't forget about safety and the environment.
That's huge these days.
It is one mistake, and they're in big trouble. Their cybersecurity is important, too.
Cybersecurity.
Yeah, in their 10K, they talked about their program to protect themselves from cyber attacks.
So many things to worry about.
It's a complex business. And finally, they need the right people.
Steelworkers.
Exactly. Engineers, geologists, technicians. In their reports, they talk about how they take care of their employees. They have these employee resource groups.
Sounds like a good place to work.
It seems that way. They know their people are important.
Okay, so we've got a company with diverse income, big costs, a focus on sustainability, and a commitment to doing things right. It's more than just an oil company. They're looking towards a lower carbon future.
They're trying to change with the times. It's fascinating to watch. But it's not easy, and they've got challenges ahead. Oh yeah, and that's where we'll pick up next time. We'll dive into all the external pressures and uncertainties that could change things for Occidental. Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into Occidental Petroleum. Last time we looked at their business model, their costs, and how they're trying to stay ahead in a changing energy world.
It was pretty eye-opening, to be honest. But you mentioned some challenges they face. What kind of external pressures are we talking about?
Well, there's this whole wave of legal stuff hitting the oil and gas industry right now. Occidental's 2024 10K specifically mentions a lawsuit against the Bureau of Land Management.
What, are they drilling where they shouldn't be?
Not exactly. Some advocacy groups are suing, saying the BLM didn't think enough about climate change and greenhouse gases when they gave out drilling permits.
Ah, so it's about their environmental impact.
Right. It's part of a bigger trend of using the courts to make the industry take responsibility.
Interesting. So beyond just following the rules, they have to navigate all this legal stuff. Could these lawsuits actually affect what Occidental does?
Definitely. It adds another layer of, well, complication and maybe big costs. If they lose these cases, they might not be able to get resources from federal lands.
So it could mess with their future plans.
Mhm.
Their report also mentioned something about earthquakes in Texas and New Mexico.
Right. There's been this debate about whether drilling, specifically getting rid of wastewater, can cause earthquakes.
Yeah, the real thing.
It's a concern, yeah. Texas and New Mexico have even made rules about it.
So they're trying to prevent man-made earthquakes.
Basically, yeah. Occidental has to follow those rules, too.
So how are they handling that?
They say in their report that they're already following those guidelines, but they admit it might affect future projects.
So they might have to avoid some areas or pay more to dispose of wastewater.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
It does. It's a real balancing act for them.
And it's not just state rules they have to worry about, right?
Right. The federal government is cracking down on methane emissions from oil and gas operations.
Methane, that's worse than carbon dioxide, isn't it?
Way worse. So there's a big push to cut those emissions.
Didn't Biden bring back those methane regulations?
He did. And in 2023, the EPA made even stricter rules.
Stricter, how so?
They want oil and gas companies to do more leak detection and repair, report problems faster, and just generally have more control over emissions.
Sounds like a lot of work. How's Occidental dealing with that?
Actually, they supported bringing those rules back. They see cutting methane emissions as part of their whole sustainability thing.
So it's good for business and good for the planet.
Exactly. It aligns with what customers want, too.
So they're on board with the EPA, but what about other agencies?
Well, the Department of Energy is pushing a lot of climate initiatives, funding low-carbon projects, and setting energy efficiency standards.
It feels like the whole energy world is shifting.
It is, and Occidental has to keep up. They're also getting pressure from investors to be more open about climate risks.
Makes sense.
The SEC, for example, wants companies to report way more detail about their emissions and how they plan to transition to a lower carbon world.
So everyone's on their case.
Pretty much. And all this pressure affects their bottom line. Their 10K reports talk about some serious financial challenges.
Okay, let's talk money. What are the biggest financial hurdles for them?
The biggest one, oil prices. They're all over the place.
Because of the war in Ukraine.
That's part of it. But also OPEC and even what the U.S. government does with its oil reserves, it's unpredictable.
So it's hard to plan ahead when you don't know what'll happen next week, let alone next year. What other financial risks are they dealing with?
Everything's getting more expensive thanks to inflation. Finding, developing, and producing oil and gas, the costs are all going up.
And then there are those unexpected problems that pop up, like hitting a rough patch while drilling.
Yeah, or transportation issues, getting the oil to market.
All those things that eat into their profits.
Right. And sometimes working with other companies on their properties doesn't go smoothly. It can lead to delays and arguments.
It's a complicated business.
It is. And then there's always the risk of getting sued.
We talked about those permit lawsuits, but are there other legal battles going on?
Their 2023 10K mentioned a case involving Anadarko Petroleum, a company they used to own.
Anadarko, okay.
It's about a tax refund from way back in 2016. The IRS audited them and said, nope, now they're fighting it out in court.
Over a tax refund, how much are we talking?
If Occidental loses, they might have to pay $1.8 billion.
Wow.
It shows how mergers and acquisitions can come back to bite you.
So even big companies can get hit with unexpected costs. How do they handle all these financial risks?
Their 10K reports actually talk about their risk management strategies.
Strategies, okay.
They've identified 5 main areas where they're vulnerable: commodity price risk, interest rate risk, credit risk, foreign currency risk, and liquidity risk.
Let's break that down. Commodity prices, that's the oil and gas prices going up and down, right?
Exactly. They use things like derivatives to try and protect themselves. It's like insurance against those price drops.
Smart. What about interest rates? They have a lot of debt, don't they?
They do. When interest rates go up, their borrowing costs go up. It's a problem for any company with debt.
Then there's credit risk, making sure people pay their bills.
Yeah, Occidental has to be picky about who they work with to make sure they get paid.
And what about foreign currency risk? They do business all over the world.
Right. They constantly watch currency markets and may use hedging to reduce the impact of changes.
It's like they're playing a financial chess game.
Kind of. And the last one is liquidity risk. They need to make sure they have enough cash on hand to cover their bills.
So they don't run out of money.
Exactly. They're juggling a lot of things, but they seem to be on top of it. They're aware of the challenges and have plans to deal with them.
So we've looked at the pressures from outside and the financial risks. What about what's going on inside Occidental? What are they doing to get ready for the future?
That's a great question. And that's where we'll pick up next time. We'll look at their financial plans, investments, and how they're trying to build a sustainable business for the long run.
Welcome back for the final part of our Occidental Petroleum Deep Dive.
The grand finale.
We've looked at their business, the challenges they face, how they're dealing with a changing world.
A lot to cover.
Now, let's get into their long-term game plan. What's their secret sauce for the future?
Well, their financials give us some hints. One thing that pops out is their equity investments. They're putting money into other companies.
So spreading the wealth.
More like strategic moves. It gives them a say in things beyond their core business.
Interesting. What kind of investments are we talking about?
One that caught my eye was Western Midstream Partners, WES.
WES, okay.
They operate midstream assets, pipelines, processing plants, the stuff that moves and processes oil and gas.
So Occidental's not just producing, they're investing in how those products get around.
Exactly. And their ownership stake is pretty big, almost 49% of the limited partner units, plus they control the general partner.
So they have a lot of control over WES.
They do.
What else are they investing in?
Another one is the OxyChem Ingleside facility down in Texas. They own half of it.
What's that one about?
It's a big chemical plant, makes ethylene, which goes into plastics and all sorts of stuff.
So they're in chemicals too, not just oil and gas.
Right. It's like they're connecting different parts of the supply chain. And remember, their carbon capture project with BlackRock.
Yeah, the air capture thing.
That's structured a bit differently. BlackRock's involved, but they don't have majority control.
So it's a partnership.
Yeah, a variable interest entity. It lets Occidental team up with others, share the costs and the risks of developing this new tech.
Smart move. We can't talk about Occidental without mentioning Warren Buffett, can we?
The Oracle of Omaha, his company, Berkshire Hathaway, is a major shareholder in Occidental.
What's the story there? Why is Buffett so interested?
As of December 2023, Berkshire owned a ton of Occidental stock, like 244 million shares. Plus, they have warrants to buy even more, and they've put money into Occidental's preferred stock, too.
That's a serious investment.
It is. Their reports don't say exactly why, but we can guess.
Speculate a bit.
Occidental has good cash flow. They focus on giving back to shareholders. They're working on reducing debt.
Things a value investor like Buffett would like.
Exactly. And maybe their carbon capture play is attractive too. It's a long-term bet on a low-carbon future.
Maybe Buffett sees them as more than just an oil company.
That's a good point. Now let's shift gears a bit. Their financials also tell us about how they treat their employees.
The people who make it all run, what kind of benefits do they get?
Their 2023 10K highlighted a pretty comprehensive package: health, welfare, retirement plans. They even offer professional memberships, work-life balance benefits, and programs for employee well-being.
So they're trying to attract and keep good people.
Definitely. It's a competitive industry.
Makes sense.
They also talked about creating a safe, collaborative workplace and highlighted their diversity and inclusion efforts.
So more than just a paycheck.
Right. They've got employee resource groups, ERGs,
What are
groups formed by employees with common interests, like women's leadership, veterans, LGBTQ plus folks.
building a sense of community?
Exactly. It's about making everyone feel welcome and valued.
Now, back to sustainability. We talked about carbon capture, but what else are they doing on the environmental and social front?
Their 2022 10K laid out their whole sustainability framework.
The framework.
Yeah, it's got 4 main parts: environmental performance, social responsibility, corporate governance, and transparency.
Covers all the bases. What do they actually do in each of those areas?
For the environment, they want to cut emissions, use less water, protect biodiversity. Renewable energy and carbon capture are big parts of that.
So, taking real action. What about social responsibility?
That's about how they treat employees, communities, suppliers. They talk a lot about human rights, safety, being involved in the community.
Being a good neighbor.
Right. And for corporate governance, they're big on ethics. They have a code of conduct, a whistleblower hotline.
Keeping things honest.
Exactly. And for transparency, they want to communicate openly with everyone. Investors, employees, the public. They publish sustainability reports, keep their website updated.
So people know what they're up to.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been quite a journey. We've seen Occidental's business, their financials, their risks, their commitment to their people, and their sustainability efforts.
They're a company in transition, trying to find their place in a world that's changing fast.
So what's the big takeaway for our listeners? What should they be watching as Occidental moves forward?
Pay attention to their carbon footprint. Will they actually reach their net zero goals? How successful will they be with carbon capture? Will it become a big moneymaker?
Good questions.
And can they handle all the regulations, keep investors and customers happy? It's a tough balancing act.
It's a lot to handle, but they seem ready to tackle it head on. They're making bold choices, trying to be ready for a future that's all about sustainability.
It's a fascinating story, and it's not over yet.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Occidental Petroleum. We'll be back with another company deep tag soon.